March 2025 marked a pivotal turning point in global energy history. Rongsheng Petrochemical, the Chinese oil giant renowned for its massive 800,000 barrel per day processing capacity, made a bold and strategic move that shook Washington and changed the rules of the global oil game. The Chinese company suddenly opened its first office in Calgary, Alberta, Canada's energy capital. This wasn't just routine paperwork, it was the birth of a powerful energy alliance. Rongsheng swiftly and brilliantly signed a historic agreement with Canadian oil giant Suncor Energy. The first shipment of Canadian crude oil destined for China was set for June 2025. Behind this strategic partnership was a key figure, Wang Jie, a renowned energy trading expert, previously the head of PetroChina International Canada Trading. His move to Rongsheng in January 2025 as the lead representative for all of the Americas sent shockwaves through the global energy sector. Wang Jie arrived to spearhead a master plan designed to break Canada's decades-long energy dependence on the United States. The real game-changer was Canada's Trans Mountain Pipeline, whose expansion was completed in May 2024. This monumental project nearly tripled its capacity, reaching 890,000 barrels per day, enabling Canada for the first time in history to export directly to booming Asian markets. The Canadian government's massive investment became fully justified as trade threats began to emerge from Washington. In a desperate attempt to pressure Canada, former President Donald Trump proposed imposing a 10% tariff on all Canadian energy imports. However, what he thought would be a decisive pressure tactic backfired spectacularly. Canada responded swiftly, and its alliance with Rongsheng became a powerful strategic countermeasure, completely reshaping the energy balance. Now, Canada, backed by Rongsheng, was no longer dependent on the United States. Instead, it advanced confidently toward becoming a critical energy supplier to China, Japan, and South Korea. This bold move not only diversified China's energy sources but also significantly boosted Canada's geopolitical standing on the global stage. Thus, as tensions in Washington escalated, Canada took a definitive step towards energy independence, marking a historic shift in global economic and political dynamics. The new energy alliance between China and Canada was no longer just a business strategy, it was a clear message to the entire world. In this new energy landscape, those who move quickly and intelligently dominate the game. Have you ever wondered how a single project can completely transform a country's energy trajectory? That's exactly what happened with the expansion of the Trans Mountain (TMX) pipeline in May 2024. A project that increased its transport capacity from 300,000 barrels of oil per day to a remarkable 890,000. Visualize each of those barrels crossing Alberta's majestic mountains, winding through valleys and forests, and arriving at Pacific ports. With this boost in capacity, Canada not only supplies its southern neighbor but also extends its reach to the most competitive Asian markets. The undertaking wasn't merely an engineering challenge. It was also a strategic step of considerable magnitude. For years, Canada's oil production depended almost exclusively on the United States as its main buyer. This concentration, experts say, posed a high risk. Any political or economic fluctuation in the US could directly affect Canada's finances. So, when the Canadian government and its industries saw an opportunity to diversify, they wasted no time in pursuing this expansion. As a result, from May to November 2024, China, driven by its growing energy demand, imported about 2.03 billion Canadian dollars in Canadian crude. That figure took analysts by surprise, who viewed it as a clear indicator of the global appetite for Alberta's oil. Nevertheless, any major project brings challenges of its own. In TMX's case, one of the first hurdles involved its actual usage. While its capacity grew significantly, utilization hit only 77% in the initial months. Several factors are behind this number. Transport fees are higher than expected, which discourages some oil companies from making full use of the system. Additionally, some of them prefer to keep flexible contracts, wary of worldwide market volatility. These differences have reportedly escalated to regulatory hearings, highlighting the typical friction faced by infrastructure still settling into its full operational phase. But things don't end there. Trans Mountain Corporation, the entity in charge of this infrastructure, already has new expansion plans in mind. its engineers are studying the possibility of adding more powerful pumps and friction-reducing agents to the pipeline. The potential outcome? An extra 200,000 to 300,000 barrels per day. Should this come to pass, this new phase would allow the pipeline to reach figures rarely seen in the history of Canadian energy projects. What does this mean for Canada's international relations? Initially, it consolidates Alberta's standing as one of the world's foremost oil hubs. It also gives Ottawa a key bargaining chip when negotiating with other countries, as it's no longer wholly reliant on the United States as its sole buyer. However, this energy independence also carries its own diplomatic pressures. Many wonder how Washington will react if it sees some of the oil that once flowed to its refineries now heading across the Pacific. There's a chance we could witness protectionist moves or, conversely, see new agreements emerging to maintain balanced trade routes. After all, the global energy market is dynamic and highly competitive. Every technological advance, every additional mile of pipeline, and every supply contract can shift the balance of power. In the case of the TMX, this pipeline is more than a conduit for oil. It's a tangible representation of Canada's determination to play in the global league. Should it iron out issues with fees, build stronger acceptance among oil companies, and ultimately operate at maximum capacity, it could become an international benchmark. For now, one thing is clear. The Trans Mountain Pipeline is marking a turning point in Canada's export history. Transitioning from heavy reliance on the United States to an expanding presence in Asia indicates that North America's energy power map may well be getting redrawn. Perhaps in a few years, we'll look back on this expansion as the tipping point that propelled Canada to completely reshape its role on the global energy stage, all starting with the resolve to take Canadian oil far beyond traditional borders. February 2025 arrived with the Trump administration suddenly altering its course on trade policy. In a series of televised statements, President Donald Trump announced a 10% tariff on Canadian energy imports, citing alleged national security threats. For many, this measure was the spark that ignited a time bomb in an already fragile bilateral relationship. The response was swift. Oil companies north of the border, already on alert over Washington's shifting policies, watched their markets falter. Oil, natural gas, and even electricity became less competitive in the U.S. market. A source close to the Canadian government described the situation as a trade earthquake, forcing Ottawa to step up efforts to diversify exports and at least partially reduce dependence on its powerful southern neighbor. Meanwhile, on the international stage, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced possible countermeasures to protect EU interests, while China's Ministry of Commerce did not hesitate to condemn the action, promising proportional retaliation. Almost overnight, the prospect of a large-scale trade war became a reality, and diplomatic alarms began sounding around the globe. In the streets of Calgary and Edmonton, energy sector workers feared for their jobs. Canadians who, until recently, trusted in the solidity of their relationship with the United States, suddenly had to ponder a future in which their historically dependent neighbor could turn into a double-edged sword. Canada's government, for its part, intensified talks with other emerging powers, expressing interest in expanding exports to Asia and Europe. Meanwhile, industry representatives felt increased urgency to forge new international alliances. But what was President Trump really aiming for with such a sudden move? Some analysts speculate it was part of a political strategy to gain support among nationalist sectors, while others suggest it was a ploy to divert attention from other internal issues plaguing his administration. Either way, the impact of this measure far exceeded expectations, drawing global actors into a showdown on the trade chessboard. What's undeniable is that this episode marked a turning point in how Canada interacts with the global energy market. After these tariffs were imposed, the country began re-evaluating its export priorities and devising strategies to stay competitive. And while the story is far from over, the trade tensions with the United States left a clear lesson. In a world where politics and economics dance to the tune of shifting interests, resilience and the ability to diversify can mean the difference between success and chaos. Can a single pipeline shift the global balance of energy power? Canada proved it can. Following the expansion of the Trans Mountain in May 2024, the nation that for decades had almost blindly relied on the US market made a dramatic pivot toward Asia. The catalyst? Tariffs of up to 25% imposed by the Trump administration on Canadian energy products. It was almost like watching a masterful chess move. While the United States sought to pressure Canada into renegotiating the USMCA under favorable terms, Ottawa responded by redirecting thousands of barrels a day to other destinations. Thanks to the TMX, export capacity to the Pacific coast shot up from 300,000 to 890,000 barrels per day. This enabled Canada to ship cargoes directly to China, Japan, South Korea, and even the ever-competitive India. China, with its insatiable energy appetite, swiftly took its place as the leading buyer. Between May and November 2024, it purchased more than 2.03 billion Canadian dollars worth of crude from the TMX. A discount of $4 to $6 per barrel compared to Brent is rumored, which greatly appealed to major Chinese refineries like Rongsheng, PetroChina, and Sinopec, eager to secure a stable and, above all, sanction-free supply. What's more, this oil is a perfect fit for their refineries, being heavy and sour. Exactly what they need to maximize industrial fuel production. But Asia's biggest player wasn't the sole focus. Japan, South Korea, and even India saw a golden opportunity in Canada's pivot. INEOS, Japan's largest refinery, struck its first deal to acquire Cold Lake, a less sour crude than Access Western Blend, while GS Caltex in Korea tested Canadian shipments, looking to diversify its supply portfolio. India's Reliance Industries also got in on the action by importing TMX crude in July 2024, directly competing with Russian suppliers in the region. Naturally, every opportunity brings its challenges. The Port of Vancouver, for instance, is not designed to handle massive supertankers, limiting how many barrels can be shipped at once. Furthermore, Canadian crude's high acid content requires special blends to be refined in Asia, adding extra blending costs. The result? Complex logistics operations and higher toll fees that may discourage some producers. Nevertheless, the benefits have been undeniable. The discount of Western Canadian Select relative to WTI has narrowed significantly, meaning higher revenues for Canadian companies. Meanwhile, China and other Asian countries have diversified their import mix, reducing dependence on traditional suppliers. In geopolitical terms, Canada gained greater bargaining power and diplomatic leverage, aligning with its 2022 Indo-Pacific strategy. On the grand geopolitical chessboard of the 21st century, oil doesn't just power engines, it powers alliances, conflicts, and power strategies. And in 2025, Canada and China made a masterful move that could reshape the global energy balance. It all began with a colossal infrastructure project, the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which began operations in May 2024. This titanic undertaking, valued at 4.7 billion Canadian dollars, tripled Canada's crude export capacity from Alberta to the Pacific coast, from 300,000 to a staggering 890,000 barrels per day. What used to be a logistical bottleneck is now a highway straight into the heart of the Asian market. And that's precisely where China entered the scene. The Asian giant, always in search of stable energy sources, wasted no time taking advantage of the new route. Within months, exports of Canadian crude to China skyrocketed. Between May and November 2024, Beijing purchased over 2 billion Canadian dollars in Canadian oil, a record-breaking figure, but one that still doesn't tell the full story. Because what truly matters isn't how much oil is sold, but to whom and why. For Canada, this commercial expansion means more than just income, it means independence. For decades, 97% of Canadian crude went to US refineries. That dependence, convenient but dangerous, left Ottawa vulnerable to Washington's political whims. But now, with TMX open and Asia thirsty for energy, Canada holds a powerful card. It can negotiate better, it can resist pressure, it can chart its own energy future without looking south. And while Canada breaks free, China secures what it needs most: reliable, secure oil, far from the geopolitical chaos of the Middle East. In a world where shipping routes are vulnerable and tensions in the Strait of Hormuz rise every week, Canadian crude offers strategic calm for Beijing, less dependence on Saudi Arabia, less fear of a naval blockade, more control over energy security. But not everyone is happy. In February 2025, President Donald Trump, back in the White House, unleashed a storm by imposing a 10% tariff on Canadian energy imports. The stated reason? National security. The reality? Frustration over losing influence over Canadian oil. Trump's move didn't just further strain US-Canada relations, it accelerated Ottawa's diversification strategy. It was like pouring gasoline on an already blazing fire. Instead of backing down, Canada doubled down on Asia, signing new agreements and strengthening ties with China, Japan, and South Korea. Today, the global energy map looks very different. It wasn't just a pipeline that changed, it was a new network of power. The collaboration between Canada and China proves that strategic infrastructure can be more powerful than diplomatic treaties. TMX isn't just a steel tube, it's a declaration of independence. And China's response wasn't a trade war or a military threat. It was a phone call, a massive purchase, and a quiet, relentless alliance. So, while the United States builds tariff walls, others build energy bridges. And at that intersection, Canadian oil may be the key to a new world order. One no longer centered solely around Washington, but also Calgary, Shanghai, and the Pacific. Because in 2025, oil isn't just black gold, it's power, it's diplomacy. It's the silent language of 21st century empires. And Canada, against all odds, has learned to speak it fluently.